Well, good morning, everyone. We are here for another Lent in Parables class, and as you can see, we are in our beautiful sanctuary. It's always wonderful to be in this space, and I've chosen it today for the video because it kind of applies to our parable this week. And it's an amazing parable. It's a challenging parable. The parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. And without further ado, let me read it for you. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. Two men went up to the temple to pray. One a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus: God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of all my income. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. The Pharisee and the tax collector. It's kind of, in a way, kind of like the granddaddy of all parables for me, because it's all about it's about so many things. It's about judgment. It's about prayer. It's about the posture we should have when we go to God. And I wanted to start off by reminding you that this is a parable. And it's kind of, the people are in a way maybe kind of caricatured. It's not a real story. It's Jesus trying to tell us something about the kingdom. And I want to say something first about the Pharisee. Here's a communion rail. So there's two men, and they've both come to the rail, if you want to say, to pray. The first one, the Pharisee, is, we've been conditioned in reading the Gospels to kind of think of the Pharisees as the bad people, the enemy of Jesus, which they are often. But in their life, in their day-to-day life, Pharisees were good people. They did good things. And you heard him list off these things that he was. But one thing he wasn't was humble, right? He was not humble. And the prayer that he offered, it really wasn't even a prayer. It was because he didn't need anything from God. He was already good. So that's on one hand. You've got this really good person who's doing good things, but who doesn't see himself in the right way in his relationship with God. On the other side of the rail, over here, you got the tax collector. And just as the Pharisee was good, his actions were good, the tax collector's actions were horrible. To be a tax collector in that time was to be in cahoots with the Romans, the hated Romans. And basically what tax collectors did was they extorted money in taxes from their own people. So they were reprehensible in their actions. So here you have these two guys. The guy who's living the really good life, guy who's living a really bad life. What's so shocking here is that last part of the parable. It says, who would go home justified that day? The tax collector. And why? Because you hear of him beating his breast, saying, I am not worthy, I am a sinner. God, have mercy on me. And, here you have this other guy saying, I'm doing everything right. Look at this loser. So it tells you something. Jesus is trying to tell us something about how God sees us. God's not shocked or offended by sin. God kind of expects it. And the sinner is acknowledging his sin. This other person is not. And we all get like this sometimes. We get righteous. We've all been said that same prayer or that fake prayer. Like, oh, look at that loser. I'm so glad I'm not like that. But again, there's this leveling of the playing field. We're all sinners. We're all broken. And in this parable, Jesus is saying, acknowledge that sin. Acknowledge that sin. And I get the impression that this isn't a one-time deal. Every time the person who acknowledged their sin is the one who's going to go home justified. It's not just one time in your life, and then you have to get it perfect. That's the way God sees us, is as broken people who are in need of redemption. When we don't know we're in need of redemption, that's the trouble. That's the trouble. So that's the essence of this parable. For me, I'm looking forward to discussing this parable with you. I think, there's a lot there. Like I said, about prayer, about justification, about judgment, about righteousness, false righteousness. There's just so much to discuss. And so we will gather again on Thursday at 7 p.m. on Zoom. You'll receive something this week with the instructions on how to get on the Zoom. And if you have any questions, call me. My number's on there, or call Rachel at the office. I really look forward to discussing this parable with you this week. See you then.